back to Underrated Movies. I'm your guy, I'm your man, Mr. Alton Henry, and today I'd like to talk to you about another film that I believe is severely underrated, doesn't get talked about enough, but it has spawned, I think, about 4 sequels, and I'm going to talk to you about, or I would recommend watching, is VHS, released in 2012, is directed by several filmmakers in the indie world. That's basically an anthology horror found footage series of just random horror films that somehow may or may not be connected, which really they are not. Where the central premise of these stories is that you have a story, you have one single story, involves characters being introduced to unusual videotapes or cassettes, and they watch them and they are introduced to these other weird short films or these other short stories, and somehow they give off some sort of weird energy that represents the bigger picture of what's actually happening, which is not always the case. This is more likely an experimental horror film where they try to add something, just story elements to see why these stories are really connected, which they are not. They're not. They're just anthology series. And I forgot how I discovered it, but I remember I watched it the first time, I think back in 2013 or 2014. It might have been 2013, almost 10 years ago. The movie literally like a year after it almost came out. And I have to say, this is one of the best found footage movies I have ever seen. And the reason for that, I believe, in my opinion, that it's very experimental, and it kind of does rip off other horror films, found footage horror movies, but I think this one does it better because I think this one had, I guess, more freedom for the filmmakers to I guess to kind of experiment with their stories. There's like I think 5 stories. You have the main one. How many filmmakers are there? Yeah, one, two, three, four, five. So there's 6 stories, and within the first story, it tells the other 5. And after each story ends, one of the characters kind of discover like, wait a minute, what's going on? Like I didn't like the characters don't understand what they witnessed. So they try to kind of wrap their head around it while the first story kind of continues. It's kind of like Cloud Atlas a little bit, where you have one story that kind of intertwines and it kind of goes back and forth. Similar to that, but with this, they try to have something meaningful by having these characters watch these videos, and somehow it gives off like some sort of unusual, supernatural, and dark premise, or like a dark presence that inflicts on them, and well, there's consequences when it comes to watching these videotapes. But what I really liked about this first one, and after watching all the other sequels, I might review the other sequels, is that they're all standalone and they don't try to really necessarily connect. They try at first. It kind of gives a little hints of them trying of each story trying to connect um, to the first one, but it doesn't necessarily really. Only on the sequels, it kind of glosses over where it kind of really puts the point that so that some of these stories may or may not be connected spiritually, but not like literally, but spiritually. And what's really the best thing about these stories, this film, where it feels like in almost every story, you believe it's going to go in a certain way, and then it doesn't, and it turns a 180 and it goes a different direction. Where I feel like when the film builds up to its horror element, it's complete and utter shock. And what I mean by that, if I have to say one of my favorite stories, I think there's like maybe 2 of them that really stood out to me. I really like the first story, directed by Adam Wingard, who's, I think, out of all of them, I think gotten the most popular directing certain such films like the adaptation of Death Note, and I think he did the Godzilla versus Kong. His film basically starts off the overall movie, and kind of I guess his ones is the one that kind of starts and ends. I wouldn't say no start and end. His story is the I think tape 56 where they're looking for we have a group of criminals looking for a specific tape and they're being paid off by some anonymous party who wants the tape for some sort of specific reason. And the criminals break into this home and they start watching the videotapes, but and they also discover a dead body, an old man dead body. And after each tape, one guy after the other starts to disappear, or there's some weird entity that's in the house, and everybody starts to freak out. And when it gets to the last story, well, the last story is the one that plays the film and it completely ends the movie overall. There is a big shock where it actually, a little of a spoiler, but it's available on Tubi now, so I think it's going to leave soon. So watch this movie immediately, or you can rent it on YouTube. Where it's actually this old man that turns into some sort of zombie-like monster and bites the mess out of one of the main characters. And then I think one of my also favorite stories, in fact, actually, there's more except for two. I'm sorry. Is the first short. I think that story might be called Amateur Night, where a group of guys decide to get drunk one night, pick up some girls, and one of them notices um, a mysterious girl following them, but they end up actually joining in on the girl ends up joining in with the guys, and the girl repeatedly tells the main guy who the camera is actually in his glasses that he likes him, and turns out she turns into some sort of demonic entity where she starts to eat everybody, which was shocking. The way it builds up and the reveal was just so crazy. Like it's so fucking brutal. It's crazy. And then another one that I really liked was the one where it deals with an exorcism. That's the last story where set in 1998, where a group of guys get invited to a Halloween party, and it turns out when they arrive, it's an exorcism, and there's a bunch of misunderstandings that happen, and they try to rescue the victim who's being tortured and being exorcised, and they fail to realize that to their end that they rescued a demon. And there's another one that was very weird, but it was very interesting. I actually like the concept of it, where it deals with a girl inviting her friends to the woods, and they're not really there to have fun. The girl's intentions, and this is a spoiler, is to sacrifice the friends that she's been hanging out with to capture this serial killer who somehow is you're unable to see it except through a video camera, and the killer's kind of like all digitized through the camera lens. You're only able to see it through the camera. And actually, the girl may be able to see it too, but she's only able to see it through the video camera. And the way that the twist kind of like builds, like reveals itself. It's very shocking. I loved how each short film, that there's somewhat of a little twist where you kind of don't know where it all is going to go. And when it reveals, it's very surprising and very quite shocking. And when it ends, well, it's a horror film. Most horror films end unhappily. And this is a great series. This is a great freaking film. I think out of all the ones that I've seen in the VHS series, this might be the best one because this one has a more, I think, impact to it. But there's some other good ones that you have to check out, story wise. And what I probably will do is review all the other films that if I could find all of them. there should be available on Tubi at this time. I think the second film is also available on Tubi. I don't know about the third film. I did see the fourth film that came out. I let's just say somehow I got on YouTube. I was able to watch it. But you need to check this out. If you're a horror fan, if you're a horror fanatic, if you love found footage movies, please check this out. VHS, released in 2012. I highly recommend it. Let me know in the comment section below what is your favorite underrated movie, and also let me know what you consider to be one of the most underrated horror films that you've seen that does not get talked about enough.